Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode. I'm a bit nasally, but I decided to record an episode. I've had a recent realization, and I feel it's an important realization, and this episode is dedicated to how far my eyes have come so far. I thought about something that is going on, but we, as people in the world, don't speak about often. We try. It's as if there's something going on that I feel the species is ignoring. And in some sense, we have to ignore it. But in another sense, ignorance is ignorance. You know, there is no good or bad ignorance in some sense. The title arose, Freedom from how our minds create others. Or freedom from how our mind creates others, that works. I have been fascinated by the mind for some time. I have been fascinated by existence, and my fascination has taken me towards questions. So think of it this way: a creature opens its eyes in a world. Consciousness finds itself grounded. Or poetically, the soul lands on earth. Or the soul enters earth. Eyes open, and immediately our consciousness is acquainted to movement. Even though a person says, okay, I'm a physical body, I'm an object, but in reality, we are not just an object, we are a dynamic object. So really, it's kind of like everything's moving in the world, but in some sense it's moving so slow that we're like, okay, my individualism can exist, right? If every process that is happening for the human intelligence, if it speeds up, we will surpass our humanity, right? To be honest, just like there's room temperature, right? There is a speed for a species, right? For the intelligence of a species. The intelligence of a creature specifically. So just like, think of it this way, that as the temperature rises, the molecules in the air begin, in some sense, vibrating quicker and quicker. Life seems to be designed to project a sort of container, and then pressures from within the container or outside of the container adjusted, right? We are not just a relationship with a human physical body, we are in a relationship with a dynamic existential event. It's like we're not, think of it this way, we look at a human being and we're like, okay, there's some sort of life force in that human being. So it would be as if we just look at the idea of human force. So if we want to wonder about what sort of intelligence of movement from a dynamic view, forces make sense. To be conscious, or to be alive as a creature, is to be a sort of force, to be a shaped force. Now, in wondering about how this force moves, so you see, when a person finds something new, two things can happen. I find this to be true for any sort of new experience. The definition of new, novelty, can be that there is an initial reference, there is a initial way reality is held or familiarized. And anytime something new happens, it is either changing the context of the moment or the concept in the moment. Our consciousness arises as a self in a world, right? Now, anything that happens to us, it's either an event of the world, it's either an event of ourself, or it's a co-creation. For example, the title of this episode I'm speaking about today is about not just how the world moves our sense of self, but how our sense of self moves the world, and the way our minds, the way the human brain is interacting with reality is so fascinating and bizarre. And it's like, at first, philosophically, to comprehend the nature of one's existence is a bit scary. I'm not gonna refute that, but it's like the fascination for the mystery of what we are is beyond the amount of fear we have of it. You know, the way I have managed in this life to not allow fear to not in all contexts, but like how I've not allowed fear to paralyze me, or in some sense slow me down, is by realizing that there is so much more to be fascinated about in this world than to fear, right? And fear is fascinating, right? That means, sometimes I see somebody who's afraid of spiders, and I wonder, like, why? It's fascinating to me how one mind has an acceptance with a sort of image and a phenomena, but a mind doesn't, another mind doesn't, right? It's like, where do our preferences, I shouldn't say where our preferences come from, but in some sense, why are our preferences there? This is important to ask whoever you are. To study the world is very fascinating, because you end up studying a world that was here before you were born. So let me say it this way. Certain scholars have said the human being is in two worlds. Okay? And these two worlds, it's in a manner of speech, in the sense that there was a world here before the person was born, and there will be a world here after they pass away. Right? So there's that world. And then there's the world that started from the moment we were born and we became conscious as a persona in a biological organism, right? Our body is born, but the mind is not born, and the mind awakens as if a process has become intelligent enough to notice itself, really. So this idea that we are under the impression we're these characters in a story, and granted, physically true, right? Physically, we're creatures in a world, right? But the pointer about the two worlds that scholars suggest is that there is a world that we can access due to our reason. That means if a person's like, okay, I'm a very reasonable person, let's say somebody feels like they're their own hidden professor of logic, So it's as if the logic is limited to the information from the beginning of the lifetime to the end of the lifetime, right? And it is very obvious to consider that the human brain is just like this adorable, biological, biochemical mechanism that is happening and and the amount it can receive, there is so many things that the human mind is, what I'm trying to say is like it's like a USB drive with like a couple gigs of space, and the person wants to like upload a couple terabytes. To understand human reality, the scale of that information is in some sense so vast that we have to wonder, why are we limited in the most, in when it comes to the search for the most important questions of reality, right? It's as if the brain is not here to comprehend the whole universe, because it's a small part of it, but because the brain has a capability, it's as if the brain is here to do something, right? Seldom is this said, but purpose finds its meaning through how it was projected into existence. We human beings seek out purpose, and purpose is an important motivation. You know, anybody who says they don't have a purpose it's like saying they haven't looked at the world enough to have a sort of view on it, right? The privilege of being a biological evolution, 4.5 billion year old evolutionary animal in the making, like the privilege of that is unique perception, right? When I was younger, I remember I was shy and I didn't trust the outer realms on an emotional level, not intellectually. I've trusted reality from the beginning, but on an emotional level, right? I didn't trust reality, and I was super shy, and I was like just, being eyes in space rather than being a person. But then I got this realization where I'm like, what's the point of having a unique DNA, occupying a unique position in the space-time continuum, and not being the self that is here, right? I mean, this is something very important, because we are living at a time in human history where, rather than every human being reconsidering how their own value system is or what, rather than wondering about the hidden value system of who they really are, we are more in a conditioned situation. It's like, this is not a good metaphor, but it's like we're all sheep in a herd, okay? And the sheep have began talking, and some of the sheep are noticing that all the sheep are behaving similarly, right? Right now, if we truly looked at a human being, we can make this claim that the person doesn't know, right? It doesn't know who they are if they are trying to be like something else outside of them, because the whole point of, again, occupying a unique moment in this unique point in the space-time continuum, and having a DNA that nobody else has, and at the same time having eyes and being a sort of unique traveler of an unknown world that nobody's ever been before, it seems that the value of reality is not for us to clone ourselves in a happy ideology, everybody's like happy in the same way, but rather to realize what is the unique potential, right? You see, the concept of potential is very liberating. A person can fail, but then they wonder about the potential of success, and sometimes failure is the marker. That means failure is a strange way the inner realms allow themselves to be able to be worthy of success, right? Because, not all cases there's karma, but I'm saying when it comes to victory, like who deserves a victory? Someone who already knows, like somehow in their inner realms they've already won and they're okay, like for them to be the victory is normal, or someone who's trying to be victorious, right? It's like somebody who knows they're victorious, or who knows they're going to be victorious, and somebody who's trying to be victorious, right? It's as if the guy who was trying to be victorious, some part of his psyche was not convinced that he deserved it. Now imagine it's an Olympic race or something, some Olympic sport, and the person, there's two people, right? Let's say one of them about to get the gold medal, the other silver, and let's say the one who was trying to get to gold fails, and so he fails, and he's like, man, I became second, I didn't become first. And all his friends or whatever come and say, buddy, you became second in the Olympics, that's incredible, that's next level. But the person's like, no, why didn't I become first? Now here's the thing, if the person understands why they feel, there will emerge a view that feels it is worthy now. It's as if a person asks, imagine there's a glass of water, somebody who's giving like cups of water, and the person's like, can I have a glass of water, right? And the person says, no, you can't have a glass of water. Okay. Now that person is in some sense attempted something, tried to get a victory, but the victory was denied, and now their mind has to be like, WTF, what does this mean now, right? And what the way that it's kind of strange, but it's like failure. A lesser dimensional failure is the initiation to a greater dimensional victory, right? So what I'm trying to say is that when the person has failed, they cannot fail anymore. The fear of failure goes, and an archetypal psychology, an archetype of their psyche emerges that feels now they're worthy, right? And this is something that's not new, because religions have been utilizing this. Let me tell you what I mean. If a person does something that is wrong, that is a sin, if the person's raised, let's say, in a religious ideological system, in religion it's kind of strange. There's like barbaric judgments and sort of points of, anchors of fear, but in religious texts. But at the same time, the whole idea is like, if the person repents, then their soul is redeemed, right? But what is that redemption? Right? It's as if we are built in such a strange way as beings that if subconsciously we're holding a framework of reality true, and our conscious archetype doesn't abide by it, we feel the conscious archetype doesn't deserve to exist. Do you know? And the challenge of being a bunch of human beings on a rock in the middle of nowhere is, how can we get the species to a point where it can consider that it's worthy of its advancement, of its greatness. Right now, it's kind of hilarious. I'm this guy in these Mr.Within talks being like, yo, we gotta build an advanced civilization, right? But the worthiness, that means if right now, out of 8 billion human beings, we asked all of them somehow, let's say a global survey, right? And we were like, all right, 8 billion human beings, do you believe or do you feel that the human species deserves an advanced civilization? Let's say somehow it was possible to give the most advanced gift to the human species. Does the human species even feel it deserves a better world, a better way of the whole system happening? And we are living at a time where the past is it's hilarious. When the past possesses the future, it's kind of like the future never existed. You know, we have to be careful not only how we have experienced our past when it was happening, like how we live in the present, but also how we hold our past. That means it's not just about having a mind, it's about how you carry your mind, or how you pilot your attention in this realm. Guys, it's getting a bit cold. I'm going to get a jacket. I'll be right back. Okay. To continue. If I was to direct the viewers towards the title more, I'm trying to suggest that from the, let's say, simplicity of just thinking we're a character in a story, it's kind of like we're living in a film, but the actor is treating itself like a photograph of one moment. To comprehend the nature of reality means to wonder about how much access we have to anything happening at all. What I have come to realize is that we are living inside simulations. Think of it this way, inside known reorganized simulation of our sensory perception, and it's or let me say it this way. Right now I'm looking at the world in front of me, and I am accessing let's say a perspective where there is geometry, there's shape, there's color, there is substance, and there is space, a sort of three-dimensional world I'm accessing right now. Now, this world, it's as if the body in a three-dimensional reality takes the three-dimensional reality and removes it in accordance to its own rhythm. Think of it this way, everything, all our memories have been building up within us a sort of rhythm to live in reality. There is a dynamism to reality that just instantly takes away the question of what reality has to be to more, it's like you start off wanting to know what the world is, but that's a static analysis. But when you come to a realization that it's a dynamic movement and it's interconnected, these are important points, right? We're living in a world that if the sun, hilariously like a light bulb, was turned off, it would have a dramatic response on human psychology and all life, It's like I'm saying pretty much. From that phase in history where the creature had a relationship with itself as a known noun, it is going towards a reality where it's discovering the presence of an unknown verb. Right? If everything speeds up, our humanization goes away. It's just like the room temperature increases, the behavior of the human being is suddenly influenced. Sometimes I wonder what is the most advanced intelligence in the world, and what levels of responsibility would it have when it comes to the nature of existence. Right now, as creatures, we are responsible for our individual existence. I'm trying to encourage the species to seek the ultimate win-win, the ultimate victory of the species to build an advanced civilization. That would be a responsibility level of the person, the same way they value themselves. This is going to sound strange, but the same way we value ourselves. Like if we care for ourselves, we have to realize we don't just care for the concept, we care for the context where the concept arises. So any person who cultivates compassion ends up inevitably in the bodhisattvic path. Which is another way of saying, once you are liberated from yourself, you will realize your greater self is how the world is here. Right? A lot of enlightened beings have come across this path. Pretty much they realize it's like a solipsist stepping out of his own mind to realize all the realities that its universe was dependent on. It's like waking up from one simulation into another simulation. Imagine like concentric circles, like an onion or a Russian doll, right? That we are inside kind of like concentric sphere simulation. Okay. So once we awaken from one simulation, we discover the truth of one simulation is the truth of the simulation, bigger simulation it's in. Some people think the unnatural is bad, evil, chaotic, cruel. But I will tell you, the unnatural is like a development. It's like a strange advancement. It took us. It's like if somebody was like, how long does it take for a creature to notice it's separate from the world and create a subjective version of the world, and also notice it's separate in that reality. It's not enough to just know that you're in a simulation. The mystery goes further, and the person wonders, how am I in a simulated reality? Usually the concept of karma is tied to the idea of simulation. A lot of people know that ancient yogis, rishis, just the mystical people of the realm and history of the traditional, let's say the wisdom traditions, people know that these guys thought reality was a dream. They called it samsara. That means it's as if we're inside a video game, and that the soul, which is playing the video game, is not in the video game, right? They had this sort of attitude, but something that they don't say often is that, why is the simulation here? Right? And this is where the concept of karma explains samsara. And the idea is that something was caused. And so if we are living, think of it this way, rather than you being an attribute, being a physical being with attributes, for a moment consider that you are a non-physical, attributeless kind of, let's say, eternal viewer or something, right? And it would be as if like a multidimensional being that doesn't have shape has done something where it is finding itself in shape. And the realization of all karma, this is pretty much the solipsist's salvation, right? Where the solipsist realizes that the whole solipsism is that means the person thinking they're in their own world is starting because they have caused it. It's as if as if something non-physically caused itself to experience a physical effect in this moment. Okay? It's kind of like eternal space is dreaming as a fragmented point of consciousness on a civilization, in a galaxy, in a universe. Because something that isn't said often is that a shapeless being has no desire. We define reality based on desires. We have like the amygdala, that part of our brain which is fight or flight, and pretty much our psychology on a very biological, let's say from the biological perspective. We are seeking pleasure and we're trying to go away from pain. But when the person realizes, okay, I'm not just my body, it's as if there is another governing dimension, another factor beyond just fight or flight, beyond pain and pleasure, right? It's as if once you get bored with how attention loops and reality, you will wonder about its novelty, therefore seeking a sort of reversion to an original state. This is really what deeper spirituality is. Like, spirituality for someone could be like, yo, I had an out-of-body experience, or like, yo, synchronicities happened, or yo, this fortune teller told me something and it became real. Like, a person may feel the present is spiritual, right? But the present is the only state of being that doesn't need to have an attribute. You see, it's because we are journeying through the world where all the psychological positions of human behavior arise. If we were static, if reality was a photo, right, it would be as if there is no challenge for an unknown attention in an unknown world. We are very blessed that there is change, and we are very blessed for civilization to not just be one side of the coin. That means, imagine if it was a dystopia from the beginning, or if it was a utopia from the beginning, right? It would be so one-sided. But our species is bestowed with the ability to confront two universes simultaneously. Every human being who thinks about reality is actually thinking about it in terms of chaos and order, and at the same time, concept and context. This is really it. Even what racism is, right? I've thought about the psychology, and I've also experienced it, but at the same time, I wondered about what is it about reality that makes us identify with something that we have to resist the rest of the world, And I realized it's how people are being creatures of language and attention behind their eyes. It's hilarious. It's like when a person sees a car, imagine the car doesn't work and the person's like, man, how do I fix it? And imagine the person kicks the bumper of the car and it's like, oh, the car didn't get fixed. But in actuality, it's how the car is functioning is based on its inner dimensions, right? So it's as if we got to look under the hood of the car. Right now, when it comes to human psychology, which is a sort of movement, which is the transport, let's say subtler transport system for consciousness, right? Because that's really what psychology is. Psychology is like, what sort of ideological suit are you as an unknown attention in a known world being, So we got to look under the hood of the car, and when we come to look under really human behavior. Like, people think anybody who's ever been fascinated by psychology, it's like being fascinated with what moves the human experience. When I was explaining this to I have a twin brother. Recently, I was explaining it to him, where I was saying, I was sharing my take on reality, and I was telling him that to me, it's as if what consciousness is like a neutral attention, like a candle light in a dark room, right? So it's like this neutral attention. And what the person finds is conditioned circumstance, right? So what I mean by that is that, like, your eyes open, you access a reality, then the mind has the privilege, evolutionary privilege, to categorize reality. And if we were to categorize reality, we would look at it in the sense of efficiency and inefficiency. And so inefficiency is, how would I say, okay, I'll say it this way. We look at reality and we can divide it between problems and answers. Okay? But very specifically, I'll even say even simpler. Imagine eyes opened and you are seeing a problem set. That means not just one problem. You are seeing, your brain is capable of fathoming, or just like how we look at an object and we can humanize it, like Disney, they made the chandeliers, or like the candle kind of speak and talk, right? Similarly, we can do the opposite. The mind has the ability to look at something known and suddenly imbue within it the unknown, which is another way of saying I can look at my phone right now and my mind can suddenly realize, who called this a phone? I want to call this something else. It's like, let's say I'll call my phone a cyber brain, right? What I'm trying to say is I can suddenly imbue the unknown into the phenomenon, and suddenly the previous knowledge can become inapplicable. Something I have realized recently, this is really what I was saying at the beginning of the talk, where I'm saying I've had a realization. I'm trying to think, how can I say this in the most incredible way? And imagine the psychology of expecting something, the psychology of expectation, being as if the person is like, let's say, a sphere of like light, or like a sphere of glowing gas. Okay, let's say the person's, just for sake of me being able to explain this, I'm like, expectation extends the power of the mind into what it is, what the attention is on. Think of it this way: a person looks at an object, like right now I'm looking at my phone. In meditation, there's this idea called single-pointed concentration. Okay, in martial arts it's also there, but martial artists are accessing it differently. They're doing it more through dynamism. Meditation is like through stillness. You're trying to access you're trying to find the original world, the original earth through stillness. That's really what meditation is. But let's say the person takes a single-pointed concentration, and I could look at this phone, and as I keep looking at it, ideas pop into my mind. So anything a person looks at, right, just single-pointed concentration, you'll notice your mind your psyche trying to interact with it. Okay? So it's another way of saying, where our attention goes, the mind tries to connect itself to, right? Where the conscious attention goes, or where the conscious attention is stationed. Imagine your attention being a sort of hilarious, like a laser beam, and imagine this laser beam, wherever it's pointed to, this laser beam is like or another metaphor would be like your attention is a bird, and what branch or what type of moment has your attention landed on? And the reason I use the metaphor of the bird, because the bird can in any moment fly to a different branch, right? Right now we're here being minds that are fearing biological death, not realizing that the ability, the permission of, how would I say it? It's poetically, it's like in an unknown way, we can choose to even shift our attention out of this life. It's an, let me say it better. Think of it in one angle, it's like death in one dimension, or before that the attention can go to different parallel realities, right? Imagine hilariously there was this one soul, and this one soul had 5 parallel lifetimes, or imagine 7 parallel lifetimes, and once the soul got bored in one lifetime, it went to its other lifetime, you know? So what I'm trying to say is that it's identity is a permission based on how clearly one has realized what they are. And I'm saying that we are unknown beings. Just hear me out wherever you are listening to me. Out of all the people on this planet, you know, I looked at online, I'm like, okay, let's see what, you know, gurus are saying. And I remember I came across, this was years ago, I came across Papaji videos, right? And I remember I was watching these Papaji videos like an honest person being like, what is this guy saying? You know, and I came to realize that pretty much all advice is in some sense where to put effort. That means whether it's true reality or simulated reality, ultimately it's where our attention goes, right? Like when I look at my biological existence, I can't control like my heartbeat right now. You know, I'm not even thinking about my heartbeat consciously. It's just an involuntary part of my biological existence that just happens, just like the clouds move in the sky, like my heart beats involuntarily, right? And then I get this attitude where I'm like, okay, this is a clue, as if we're not here to just move the body, but it's as if what our intelligence is that is experiencing the human framework is an unknown decision maker. It's an unknown force. Reality animates in accordance to intentions, right? It would be another way of saying it's like if somebody, let's say from Plato's world of forms, if in an interdimensionally someone was looking at me giving these talks, like they would probably see like some sort of geometrical shape or energy just being released. That means it's like underneath my assumption. It's like regardless of what ideas I have, you know, regardless of how I feel about my own ideas, it's as if every talk I give or every talk I input into cyberspace becomes a talk where it speaks on its own, right? That means my world, you know, it's kind of like, you know, I'm that person in history who has this strange privilege of being able to, you know, it's like all the episodes I have on this YouTube channel are like all my past selves, my past senses of self. You know, and when I listen to my own talks, it's like I'm wondering about who I was and why I was being that person in that moment. Recently, I've experienced, I don't know how to say it, like interdimensionally, poetically speaking. Imagine if in another dimension there was some sort of like technological probe or some sort of, it's as if I feel I broke one of my chains, do you know? It's as if the potential of humanity is a divine power. But the divine power is like the Titan in Greek mythology that is chained, right? The Titan that is chained, it's in some sense the great power or divine power being attached to reality. The human species is like a chained titan, right? And or I would say it like a chained being. Like it's kind of it's kind of sad, even though the species has gone through historic episodes of realizing how effed up slavery was, right? But the species seems to be internally, on a psychological level, enslaved with a sort of forced performance, right? Like that's the thing about civilization, where I'm like, man, should everybody be born and try to fit into a system that was shaped before them, or is the point of life to be a human being that has never existed before until now, right? It's the sacrifice of novelty for the comfort of fitting into a past world that wasn't free enough for the future. It's like what the idea of advancement means. This whole time we've thought we have to choose between two sides of a coin, right, or between two dimensions, but the realization is we can actually give the freedom of infinite dimensions, right? That means it's about how the semantics, how the language is classifying reality, and how those classifications are standing as worlds of value of their own. Freedom from how our mind creates others, is a realization that the moment we have an expectation on the world, we have put our attention in the moment. That means like right now, like earlier I was giving the example of me looking at this phone and having different ideas on it if I was concentrating on it. Now imagine a human being concentrates on another human being. Communication is like the most advanced meditation. It's like you're having single pointed concentration on a living being, on a dynamic being, right? It's very easy to find divinity when you're alone. I will say this because the nature of the human experience is that we are our own pilots, but sometimes in life there come situations where we are passengers of reality. It's kind of like somebody getting invited somewhere and they're a passenger of what is moving that part of your reality, right? But it's like when they hold a party, it's as if they're the pilot of that reality. Do you know what I'm saying? Not only are we functioning in our own worlds, but we are our inner realms are a relationship of an attention God known to your viewers. It's like this has been such. It's like imagine something so obvious that a person can't even say it's a secret. It's like the person's like, I found a secret truth, and everybody's like, what is it? And the person's like, the secret is that before complexity had to be our definition, we were simply being. Every person right now listening to me, the idea of inner peace, that which related to Buddhic nature, the way Buddha spoke about inner peace, was not an inner peace where the person's in like some happy conditional place. It's about your realization of how your attention, it's like to be at peace with how you are not just an observer of the world in front of your eyes, but an observer of the world behind your eyes. The realization I've had recently is more where I realize, oh my God, because I am in my inner realms, I'm seeing an advanced civilization. I am trusting the world, and I am just throwing my energy into the world. It's as if imagine a human being is like, all right, you got 100 years to be a human being, to be an energetic expression, and this energetic being is like just trying to get. It's like as profound as how the poet Rumi says, before death takes away all that is given, give away all there is to give. What I realize is that my expectation on reality connects my attention to a moment, and it's another way of saying, just like how the idea of a person getting possessed by an object or an idea, right? It's as if we can also possess ideas and objects, right? And it's just how the attention moves. It was as if for the first time I I don't know how to tell you. It's like I realized my mind, my inner realms. I discovered the power of an unexpected moment. This is why I wrote unexpected states in the subtitle. I just realized that when I don't have an expectation on reality, or on anything that happens, I can actually see it. But when I have an expectation on how something should happen, I am interfering with how that thing can happen. It's like imagine the idea you have of your success influences your idea of success because it suggests how your attention moves forth in the moment. I feel a lot of wars and fights and conflicts go away if human beings realize that the value to be a human being is not just based on a physical dimension. It's based on the potential of an inner dimension. We could look at somebody who we think is evil, right? And we don't know what their potential for good action is. We may look at somebody who we think is very good and we don't know what their potential for evil action is, right? And the greater realization is we don't know what the potential of the human intelligence is beyond dualistic paradigms of the psychology, the identity. The freedom from how our minds create others arises when we don't have an expectation on the moment and we keep our energy in the framework of our body. Because sometimes if you live in accordance to your mind, you will feel your energy will be the whole moment rather than just your body. It's like think of it this way. There's 8 billion people in a house party. It's super crowded, everybody's crowded, nobody can move in the house party, and there's music playing and people are trying to dance, okay? Imagine a bunch of people trying to dance in an incredibly crowded room. That's really what, nightclubs are to some degree. It's a small space for a lot of people to get pushed into becoming close, It's as if, what do we do in a crowded room? And imagine every person who wants to dance, that's them expressing their freedom in the world. Every human being who says, I'm free to, say whatever I want, do whatever I want. It's like that freedom is I can take as much space in the room as I want, right? But if everybody starts dancing and it's a crowded room, it turns into a mosh pit. Right? It turns into something where somebody's doing a backflip and there's it hits other people, right? So what I'm trying to say our inner realms, our minds, are spaces or ways we can access the world with instantaneous freedom of how our attention directs it. Behind your eyes, you can be free in infinite ways. You can be advanced in infinite ways. There's infinite ways to actually look at how many different types of advanced civilizations can be built in a cosmos, right? It's like the advanced civilization poetically is divinity's greatest performance. As if you were religious, you hear me talk about advanced civilizations, I'm saying, okay, God created you, right? So the greatness of you is the greatness of God, right? It's as if God wants to see what's the most advanced way its creation can live. And the most advanced way religiously is to have faith in God, right? Religion is this strange but incredible ideological system where the person actually, what faith is strangely you don't have expectations. It's that's all the coach has as when the soccer players run into the field. It's like, how do you feel, coach? It's like, I have faith, you know. It's like, I have a feeling. It's like, if what faith is knowing instantly. I think that's an incredible definition for faith. Faith is instantaneous knowing, or an instantaneous acceptance, which leads to like a knowing. I'm pretty much saying a creature is born on a rock in the middle of nowhere. It suddenly awakens or snaps out of how the mind is a film overlaid on reality, but it becomes like it's like as if we have two eyes that we the same to be the same, and in Vedic thought they would say Purusha and Prakriti are simultaneous, which is another way of saying consciousness and matter arise at the same time. They arise instantaneously. Consciousness, awareness is different. Awareness is a word where the intelligence is being seen as unconditional. Consciousness is conditional. So I'm saying, I'll use myself as an example of a human being on Earth who has realized when I having expectations on the moment and having visions of the future are different states of mind, you know, because vision could be without desire, right? A person can suddenly, you know, they're going walking in the park and suddenly, like a film preview in their mind, they see what an advanced civilization looks like. Imagination appears as a film, right? For most people, their imagination is in the domain of language, right? It's like a sign of somebody who's truly has gone beyond the linguistic simulation, has transcended the language simulation, the linguistic simulation. This character in the story, or there's someone whose imagination is visual, right? That means any human being on this planet, if they can close their eyes and see films behind their eyes, from a, let's say, traditional mystical perspective, you have freed your attention from psychology, you know, before this life. You know, if I was to say traditional spiritualist comment, you know. Now, if someone says Mr.Within, is it possible that in your inner realms there is something more than image? That means it's like let's say we say somebody has an excellent imagination. I mean, nobody ever says that, but like I'm saying, but let's say somebody says, yo, this person's super creative. What does that mean? That means the way their intelligence as a being is interacting with reality, it's as if their mind is turning into additional sight. You know, it's like the mind doesn't show us the world, the mind shows us itself. The self is filtered. That means when we look at life visually, let's say it's unfiltered, it's like I'm looking at the geometry of a building in front of me, right? Like from my balcony. But when it comes to the inner realms, the nature of your, let's say, private space of intelligence, in there, if it goes beyond image, or if it is to go beyond image, or somehow a person finds a relationship where they're like, wait a minute, let me tell you what it is. It's like, let's say if we were giving levels to imagination, which this is not something that's actually possible. I mean, it's unpractical, but I'll just give it for the sake of this episode. So let's say somebody has an imaginative ability to see letters, right? So let's say basic imagination, you can visualize words, you can visualize the alphabet, you know, let's say you can do basic arithmetic, you know. So in your inner realms, you can visualize like single points of single images of objects, right? Now, as your inner realms, think of the mind being like having a gas pedal, and the more honest you are, your inner realms move faster. The more dishonest you are, the more parallel versions of reality are bogging you down or slowing you down. You know, a good metaphor for somebody who has a very fast inner realm is like somebody who had a backpack with 10 books in it and they were running, and then they take off the 10 books and then they run, right? You become a completely different being, right? The weight difference. So similarly, imagine somebody, what I'm trying to tell you is, imagine somebody behind their eyes, they access and also have a cinematic experience, they're seeing a film. So now imagine that film being experienced in such a fast and real way. That means the mind is moving so fast to itself that at some point it takes off the backpack of imagination, right? It's literally your imagination can't go faster than instantaneous knowing. So it's like you start off as a being with having an imagination, but then it evolves to instant knowing. That means there is no delay. It's like imagine a fortune teller that they never needed to tell the future because on some level instantaneously they were being all potentials of real time. The future just the idea of believing in tomorrow, to me, it feels like the same as the idea of believing in God. When people believe in God, it's like they're believing in an inconceivable power, okay? And when we think about the future hasn't happened yet. So technically the future is like an inconceivable power to the being that is present, right? That means we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but our attention is constantly just a survival of an entity in the space-time continuum is based on how your attention is on the future. But the future is inconceivable. So it's another way of saying, if the act of worship, religious worship, is the attention going to an inconceivable source, okay, it's as if the concept of the future is the inconceivable effect. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like God is the inconceivable cause, and that world and how it advances and goes forward is the inconceivable effect. Now, granted, there is the concept of apocalypse, and that's a whole. I think that would take another. I might give a lecture in the future on how an apocalypse is affecting the concept of an apocalypse is affecting, human behavior. But again, what I'm trying to say is, it seems imagination is here to provide potentials to how the present, a conceivable present, enters an inconceivable future. What I'm trying to say is, to me, I feel like religious people have God and secular society as the future. And Zen masters have emptiness. The religious person's trying to be like, okay, how do I act in accordance to God's will, right? The secular person's like, how do I act in accordance to man's will? And the Zen monk, the Buddhist monk, is like, yo, man, I'm emptiness right now, there's this incredible Zen story where there are these three monks, These three monks are sitting in the monastery, silently meditating, So imagine three monks sitting meditating. One of the monks looks at the other two and says, I have realized that I am nothing. I have realized it's a reality is a simulation. The world doesn't exist, it's a simulation. Now imagine the other Zen monk, as some time passes, then the second Zen monk says, I too have realized that, not only the world is a simulation, but the self is a simulation, The second monk says this. Some time passes, then the third monk, he's like, I gotta say something. Yeah. And the third monk, also after some time, they're all sitting in their kind of meditation, suddenly says, I have also realized that I am nothing. I have realized that matter requires nothing to be known. I have realized that space holds the world, and the nature of that space is really who I am, right? Right, so the third one's also like, I have realized I am nothing. Then suddenly out of nowhere, the first monk's like, yeah, but I realize I am nothing first. Yeah. And the Zen story is there to suggest that we can have the most fascinating ideological frameworks, right, on what reality has to be, but deep down we can't ignore how the ego has entered the moment, how the sense of self is in the moment. I could sit here and feel I am cosmic, universal, let's say, divine unity, but at the same time I can't ignore the silly fact that I'm also a biological being just chilling here recording a podcast. So what I'm saying is to become conscious of how our inner life is happening, not just our outer life. I would say maybe 80% of, maybe not 80, let's say 60% of the human population is just living with the consideration of having the outer life be valuable. If you ask the person, just a second, if you ask the person what do you desire, the person's like, I want a nice car, I want to live like Elon Musk, It's all outer realms, the person's like, I want to have the most, the biggest. It's like people are trying to be outer realm kings. That's the desire of the modern world, actually, kings and queens, right? It's hidden. It's the archaic revival of it's like people are trying to access the most advanced egoic states, but not realizing the most advanced egoic state is not the most advanced state. So most people, their desires of the outer realms, and how many people on this planet you think if you ask them, hey man, what do you desire? The person would be like, I desire freedom. I desire complete freedom as a free will in the moment, as a conceptual being. Right? It's as if the person, you see, it's more to the inner realm rather than the outer realm. Most people have outer realm desires, right? But to have an inner realm desire is to try to solve a problem that nobody can, in some sense, solve, because it is inside the architecture of your own eyes. You see, when I give these talks, I am conscious that, okay, this is how far my eyes have opened in the world, but there is so many different views on this planet, right? So reality is never something to kind of make it into a statue to worship, because for me, I found it strange that it's just the nature of language. Every person is like an advanced being beyond language, but language is not that advanced. Because we're making it our mainstream technology, we are forgetting other ways that we can be in the moment, right? Somebody back in the day saw an object or put a bunch of stones and leaves or something, feathers, and made a statue, and the person was an idol worshiper. Okay, the person saw an object, it's like, yo, this object is truth, man. This object's my God, If somebody tells me, Mr. Within, what's the closest thing, other than the language concept of God, what's something that's acting like a god on this planet? I would say currency. The economical system is it's like another universe, A person worshipped an object, an idol. They thought an object was truth. They turned an object into a statue, and their attention was just on that statue. Now, what I think happened after idol worship is that the species moved to ideal worship, which is another way of saying we made a concept into a statue and we're worshiping it like a god. For me, this might sound strange, but to behave religious, this is a very hard statement to say, but it's kind of like if a person believes God to be a concept, then they don't believe in God, which is inconceivable. That means God is technically the inconceivable concept. One of the ultimate inconceivable concepts that the human mind has generated, or has discovered, or has been revealed to it. As for me, the most divine thing about revelation is how it happened. Some people think religion is not divine, like the religions are just enterprises, like outer realm enterprises. But sometimes I look at it, I'm like, why has an idea from ancient times still lingered in the minds of people? Like that's equivalent to divinity. So imagine right now somebody making a Facebook post, and that Facebook post 6,000 years later being still remembered and people living in accordance to that Facebook post. So that would be like, okay, what kind of Facebook post is that? What sort of power, conceptual power, has allowed ideologies we see now to remain or to even journey this far? That means the journey of an ideology is divine. Which is another way of saying the fact that religions still exist today is a sign that they were tackling a contextual position of the human psyche that nothing else has come to replace. It's another way of saying the reason religions exist today is because they are responding to a problem that is not being attempted to be solved, because the material, the analytical philosophers locked down the species in one approach to reality. It's savage. It's like there's an enslavement where, let's say the person, there's shackles, there's chains. Then there's this enslavement where the inability, it's like I'm like a philosopher, and when I look through the eyes closer to a philosopher, and then I watch these debates on YouTube between theists and atheists, and they're so entertaining conceptually. And it's as if I have a distaste for any ideological system that wants to make a world that is so big and so filled with dimensions. It's as if who has time to live inside a story when the advancement of civilization is an endless story. The whole point of our species not going extinct is to have the idea, the psychological position undisturbed in an infinite walk. We might be creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, but we're performing as if we're going to be around. The species is going to be victorious, even though individuals come and go, right? Sometimes I have felt like, this might sound bizarre, but I'll keep it in the domain of poetry. Sometimes I have poetically felt that it's as if God is like someone reading a book and my lifetime is like the sentences in that book. You know? It's as if every sentence it like has a soul of its own, poetically. Anyways, where am I going with this? I'm talking about that pretty much objects were defining us, subjects were defining us. Now the species is realizing both of these are limited technologies due to the limitations of the brain. So it's another way of saying we have to quickly, as a biological organism, quickly become acquainted with the nature and with the texture, or how our minds are influencing the texture of the moment. Once you discriminate and realize this, you will suddenly realize why I'm saying the expectation is a sort of how would I say it? To expect something from the moment is like a solipsist wanting to act like God, in some sense. An advanced humanity, an advanced being, a human being, is a human being that is aware of all the dimensions that it's being and all the dimensions where it's doing things. Okay. Now the challenge that Carl Jung, for example, realized is that, okay, there's this whole world happening. We're like this small event in a big world. And so the small event, we call it consciousness, and the big world is the unconscious. But now, in some sense, could it be that there is a world where our consciousness is not the governing factor? So think of it this way: if I have to wake up in the morning to be able to access the world, my consciousness entering the moment, in some sense the framework of the world being there, it's another way of saying if worldhood, if matter is dependent on Purusha, if Prakriti is dependent on Purusha, if matter is dependent on the space, if world is dependent on consciousness, then it's another way of saying if the only way we know, it's like the only way existence is known is when there's an attention in the room, right? Similarly, what attention was being in the room, or what attention, what instantaneous consciousness is being the world where our consciousness is being in. Do you see? It's another way of saying, for me, religion, right? I mean, on some level, like, to be honest, I'm a person who is patient enough to get fascinated by everything, actually. The more angles I see, the more ways I see the potential of something, the more the intelligence has ways to animate and move. It's as if the soul of the moment roars in accordance to the vision it finds. Your eyes surpass the student, the teacher, and the teaching. They are where the world is. When we don't expect reality to be in a certain way, we give ourselves the permission to see reality before we prefer it, before we value it, right? So it's this bizarre thing I'm saying where after 4.5 billion years, all these creatures on a rock living in these collective patterns of behavior. It's as if everybody is in a, imagine there was a, everybody was inside a sphere, let's say different color sphere, everybody was inside a sphere, okay, and it's kind of like we gotta climb out of how our inner realms are convincing us that the outer realms is in a specific way, come to the neutrality of realizing both our mind and body are as unknown as the edge of the world. And from that unknown, in our simplicity, trust how the world is. It's like the mind is here. The purpose of the mind is to abide with the world. It's another way of saying our mind is an intelligence that is in symbiosis with the world's intelligence. We are living not just in a world, we're also living with a world. As if we are walking companions. As if right now, as I am, a moment in the space-time continuum moving and animating, similarly, this world has visions it follows. Nature has hidden eyes that are everywhere. Or the hidden eyes of nature are everywhere. So imagine we speak, let's say I'll create a abstract situation, right? Okay, so let's say right now we fast forward civilization. Imagine somebody came and said, yo, let's build an advanced civilization, and everybody was like, yeah, let's do that. It's like somebody came and politely asked the species to seek the most advanced states of being, to in some sense advance the species, to build an advanced civilization. And people were like, oh, okay, this guy politely asked, okay, let's build an advanced civilization. So now, if we were to fast forward post agreement that is the greatest idea on earth, the advanced civilization, it would be a sort of psychological state where human beings are no longer burdened by their past. They're not suffering because of their past. The past is just archives of experiential information. They're just archives of experience. That's what the past is. The past is like a shelf filled with movies that we live through. So we don't need to suffer based on movies we've seen. Right, the person has gone through the experience to relive a moment. Of course, sure, there's a biological view as much as there's a psychological view on the human being. But anyways, I'm pretty much saying an advanced civilization would have no time to create unnecessary inefficiency for itself. This doesn't mean an agenda of filtering all ideology. It's another way of saying we're like, okay, our expectation is to in some sense become an interstellar civilization, I've envisioned it that in 600 years the species should build sky cities. And this is my vision, civilization 2.0. This is what I'm living for, guys, and what I'm telling you right now. And in 600 years, when sky cities are lifting up into the air, the human species goes and lives for 2,000 years in the sky. And human population reduces on Earth, and only the grandchildren of the greatest botanists, and people who study plants are going to be living on Earth. The rest are going to be in the sky. And most people, probably by that time, all the people who have desire and ego, they're going to go into cyberspace. So what's going to happen? And of course, this is one probability. I'm just someone who's envisioned something and is retaliating towards towards it through strategy. You know, what is intelligence but our response to a world that's the value of life. You know, there is something here. You know, this is why I feel like, okay, suffering may take the person towards an extreme view where the person feels like, man, you know, this world is a bad place, everything is bad. You know, it's like you know, the person, it's like a person tastes hatred from one dimension and their mind starts copy pasting that hatred view in all dimensions, right? Eventually the mind has to reach a point where it's hating everything except itself, then it starts to hate itself. When it starts to hate itself, the mind starts devaluing itself. When it devalues itself, it forgets that it is responsible for its value. That means, believe it or not, the future, the greatness of how great the future can be is the greatest medicine for all psychological turbulence for the species. You see, it's like after you've played a one-player game, what does the person do? They go towards a multiplayer game. Reality is a multiplayer game from the beginning. Do you know? But when it comes to studying the nature of our mind, we're studying the single-player game of our reality. Do you know? And eventually what tends to happen is that there is an ego that wants to escape from suffering, but then it realizes how the attention is held in the moment is keeping the suffering. That means in any moment, let's say somebody feels like, you know, whatever opinion they have on themselves, the mind that the person has to be like, okay, how many different opinions on the moment can I have right now, which I don't know? You see, our potential is where our hope comes from. Anybody who doesn't see a potential in something becomes hopeless. If we feel civilization is inefficient and we're gonna fail, and you know, extinction is like how, you know, we couldn't drive properly on the road of infinity, you know, of infinite time. We couldn't drive properly on the road of time, and the species went extinct. How boring. It's as if, why has nature, you know, allowed a creature to journey for billions of years, right, for a ridiculous amount of time? It's as if, for me, human beings are the Earth's way of getting an out-of-body experience, as if the planet wants an out-of-body experience, and so astronauts, you know, looked at Earth from space. Reality is beautiful, and not just because our eyes decorate it, you know. The freedom from how our minds create others means that do we as an intelligent being have the capability to find new angles to the moment? Redemption is all about actualization of potential. Failure is about missing out on potential. We are living because energy can do something in the world. We are alive because the force can animate, can move. It's like the person's like, wait a minute, am I traveling in the world, or is the world traveling through me? And when the person's eyes are open, they're traveling in a world, but when they close their eyes, ideas like worlds come and go. And to discover the intersection of the abstract mind and the real body. And when one realizes that, you become a being where your value system becomes based on the context of the future. Most people are thinking of the concept, the future of the concept they are. They're not thinking about the future of the context their concept will be in, right? Like, so many people are living for their grandchildren. It's like incredible, but it's like you're not living for your great-great-grandchildren, right? The way human beings are living now, it's as if we're pretty much like
we just care for our grandchildren, and after that we're like, not our problem, you know. But if 8 million human beings cared for humanity's journey, you know, believe it or not, our species is indirectly living for the ability of human beings to continue to experience this world. It's hilarious. Civilization, the intention of our physical dimension is to continue physically. The intention of our non-physical dimension is to not be physical. It's like our minds are not from this world, or poetically, the soul is not here. Like, even if we say a person has a soul, but where the soul is standing, it's as if there is no object or subject. There is a space that has no definition. Call it unconditional space. That's if anybody who experiences the texture of their attention like that, you will instantly reset. The context of your reality resets in accordance to your most honest experience. People think honesty is just for the outer realms. Without honesty, a person cannot trust their own mind. This is the value of honesty. Honesty means that, in some sense, do not distrust the simplest ways that life can be. In the future, a human being might be able to just experience themselves as an energy, and the person's like, instead of me, it's like the person's like, I don't identify. Imagine the person's like, I don't identify as a biological human being. I identify as electrons and neutrons and protons. Can you imagine the person's like, I identify as the periodic table, and nobody can judge the periodic table because there's nothing there to judge, There's no personality. So in the future, I can totally see dehumanized cultures and humanized cultures. Too much chaos and violence leads to an unnecessary dehumanized culture. But there can be intelligent dehumanized cultures in the future. What that means is the species is becoming responsible not just for the state of its world, the state of the world, but the state of our inner world. Because really, creativity is anything that moves in the void. That's really what creativity is. It's anything that moves in a world that doesn't repeat. That means when Picasso became famous because of his paintings, it's like he was revolutionizing how serious people had been with art. We all live fascinating inner lives, and the whole point of the internet is to reveal how advanced our lives are behind our eyes. It's not that, the internet in the information age set us free, but the internet, the cyberspace gives us a permission to set ourselves free. Right now, a person says, my body has a life, I have a physical life, and let's say my mind has an ideological subject, ego, whatever, sort of life, right? We have an objective life, which is normal to us. Or I should say instead, trustworthy to us, familiar. And we have let's say psychological life, which is, it's semi-familiar. The mind is like, we kind of know it, but we kind of don't. That's the view on mind. It's like we can't say we don't know anything about the mind, and we can't say we know what the mind is, but somewhere in between, academics are walking proudly, People don't even understand the depth and the immensity or the philosophical implication of the concept of art. Like, people don't understand that. Why? Because it's in some sense allowing the new to redefine the past. You know, when I was younger, there was a book on critical thinking, and this was at a time where my English wasn't so good, so I remember attempting to read that book a lot of times but not comprehending its nature. But years later, suddenly it dawned on me that to truly be capable of utilizing intelligence has to come from learning to move it yourself. Right? So most people want their minds to be moved, so say they seek external truth. But when you become fascinated with with how your mind moves, or with the unknown nature of just human intelligence, you become fascinated beyond. It's as if life changes from somebody trying to find truth like a treasure to realizing how they are experiencing reality is where the value of the treasure is. You know, it's like when somebody finds let's say a chest full of gold. It's as if at that moment the person's like, okay, the value of this is in my mind. The value of every object in front of me is in my mind. Because like my phone right now doesn't care if I call it a phone. Do you see? Or if I name it as a phone, it's just an object in, you know, the outer realms of physical existence. It's as if existence is silently, with utter faith, just changing with the forces of nature, right? It's like when an apple falls from a tree, the apple has no personality or psychology of why it moved that way. But when a human being, let's say, experiences some sort of inefficiency or some sort of turbulence, I just hope to see, or I should say I feel this will happen, actually, where the species will shift from the context of the interpretation of chaos and order as morality, or the human species is going to have an updated morality in the future. And that update, morality being in regards to what is ethical and unethical, or what is good or what is evil. So pretty much I'm saying what's going to happen to good and evil human beings on a rock in the middle of nowhere who think they're being good and evil is that the context of good and evil, those become outdated words, and in some sense smoothness and turbulence. That means an evil person is like a turbulent entity. It's a person's inner realms that are shaky. Do you know, anybody who's capable of violence after the realization of us being minds, like when you have access to consciousness and you're violent, it's like it defeats the purpose of the nature of our minds, right? So anybody who's violent, there's turbulence in their inner realms, okay? It's as if when we realize there's a better way we can pilot, it's like what the amateur pilot thinks is turbulence and evil. It's like the advanced pilot doesn't see evil. You see, we have to become responsible for the greatness of our species, the greatness of every human being. That means right now, imagine there's still, let's say, planetary species civil war in regards to class distinctions, nations, ideological systems, belief systems. It's as if systems, man-made systems, seem like they want to break each other, right? A man-made system is capable of the same qualities that the biological entity has. That means our ideological systems, let's say any philosopher or any person who projects that brings forth a new ideological system, they are the ideological system is imbued with the traits of their own mind. That means, like my eyes, how my attention communicates every word is like a hidden signature of how my attention has inscribed itself on an idea. It's as if every word, every concept I speak about, it's like some part of my energy is being part of the idea in the moment for me. Speech is fascinating too. What speech is to an unknown being is like, one day people are going to realize, or I've humorously imagined it, that's maybe, I'm saying maybe, the future generations might hear these Mr.Within talks, and they're going to be, if some of the stuff I say comes to happen, I don't know, I've pretty much implemented my own strategy in this lifetime, but imagine we wanted to see the greatest outcome of the greatest system. The greatest system is the greatest human beings, which are in their expression as being the systems movement. If somebody said, how is human civilization moving, I'd say it's, you can say it's moving as 8 billion creatures right now. Who knows, in the future, when the era of collective mindhood potentially comes, whether it's remembered through nature or it's, artificially presented, let's say cyberspace finds access to it. Whether we become collective cyber minds or we remember nature's mind before we were an idea, whichever happens. Excuse me. There will come a time where our inner realms will feel more real than our outer realms. We're living in that phase of history where our bodies are more real than our minds. The outer realm is more real than the inner realm. And this is a privilege. That means we're kind of like, just like my great ancestors were people in battlefields, right? Everybody's great ancestor at some point was in a battlefield. Imagine ancient wars or whatever. Just like I see that, I also see like right now, because it's way more obvious that we're being a body, a physical entity, rather than an entity that is being like the awareness of the whole space. Because it's easier to be a physical entity, we are being like the reality's focus. It's like matter is in the driver's seat. But there will come a moment for the human species where it's going to be easier to be a mind, right? And people's minds are still like private. People don't realize, like right now I have to give a talk to share what's on in like what I see in my inner realms in my mind. So the content of my mind is accessible to the outer realms, right? I'm like somebody converting my mind into words, pretty much. My inner vision is turning into outer language, Who knew this whole time, I thought I was a poet, but I was a transcendental converter of an inner world into an outer one. And what's even more fascinating is, like, right now this talk is coming from my inner realms to the outer realms. So in the outer realms, it people access it, and then the talk goes into their inner realms. It's as if communication is a way where we journey into each other's minds as a species, right? And what is the concept of love? So many people on this planet say everybody should love each other. Do you know what that would imply if everybody just loved each other right now? That would not be human. Do you know? Do you know? That means, imagine somebody woke up one day and it was world peace and everybody was in a sort of robotic, utopic, utopic kind of goodness, and we were like, oh my god, it's like, who wants artificial happiness when there is an unknown world here? Do you know? That means the concept of God, if I was to make a theological comment here, the concept of God is more important than the concept of heaven. And most people are trying to get to heaven, right? But it's as if, like, do we not as human beings wonder what we are that is living life? It's not just like the person's like, what kind of life I'm going to live. It's as if who is living your life, right? And where is your contentment? It's like, where do you plant the flag, right? Is the person just content being a physical entity, right? Is the person content realizing, oh my god, my imagination is moving my reality? Before I grab a cup of water, my mind I see myself in my inner realms go and grab a cup of water, and then the body just, fulfills the moment, right? So it's kind of like, if the mind is, I think this is an error of civilization 1.0, but if we think the mind is unreal, if we think imagination is unreal, it's like saying something a being is doing is unreal. You see, generals in one dimension, they go fight in battlefields, they experience the archetypes of power, armies, let's say fame and status, but poetically a transcendental general is not fighting on the level as a physical entity, right? So imagine right now, imagine in a hypothetical future, parallel universe to how the future could look like. Imagine, I'm just saying imagine, I'm creating a futuristic scenario here. Imagine in the future there was an extraterrestrial alien invasion, okay? And this extraterrestrial alien invasion wasn't physical. It wasn't aliens coming down from the sky. It was, in some sense, an extraterrestrial invasion of the inner territories of man's mind, of mankind, in the inner realms of mankind, right? So imagine now, in the future, I'm saying it's hypothetical, imagine when this happens, humanity is already the advanced humanity. It would be as if our invisible lie, it's like, think of it this way, those who declare war on humanity have declared war on the might of the spirit of humanity. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's this bizarre situation where if the outer realms was trying to conquer our minds, imagine poetically the heavenly armies of the spirit marching forth. It would be as if there is an invisible attempt to conquer humanity, it's as if there is an invisible guardian to humanity. right? We may think right now nothing is happening, and why is the universe so quiet, and why is there no aliens here? Based on, let's say, the fascination of Fermi in Fermi's paradox, right? But the idea is, what if in a transcendental reality something is covering our eyes, just like a person in wartime covers the eyes of their child when their nation is being bombed or something, like you see in movies, like that tragic scene, right? Or anytime you see human cruelty, like Schindler's List or something, like in these movies where the human psyche is being defeated. We may think we are alone, but we know that consciousness is an advanced unknown viewer. That means whatever sort of game of the body and the game of being a physical entity, or a game of being a subjective psychological entity, it's like the presence of the unknown. This is where the potential of infinity lives, and once we trust the world, it emanates out of us. It's another way of saying consciousness realizes that the reason it is separate from reality, it's a small part of reality, is to free itself. It's an opportunity at freedom. Existence is an opportunity about a freedom, but a freedom that is a question of the conditional ways. It's the conditional knowledge taking the individual to the unconditional unknown. And when you experience the unknown, I find this to be when somebody says spirituality, this is it. You have noticed the unknown movement in the moment, the unknown presence of intelligence. From this unknown intelligence, your life becomes how your eyes have trusted in the energy of you before your energy moves. So what happens is that the ego feels lost in a world, but that which is aware of the ego is where the world of the lost ego is. So it's as if the person's like, okay, let me entertain a religious analogy where there is a supreme creator, an inconceivable God, like an incredible, inconceivable God entity, creator of the universe beyond the universe. Now, this being created the universe. It's as if to believe in God is to believe in an ultimate caretaker. It's to believe that the world knows what it is doing in a way that we can never. That's what the profoundness of the idea of God, right? Now, then the question comes, like the view comes, that okay, if my man's life is for God to judge man, to test man, because religion is, we're not living for ourselves, we're living for what created our idea of self. The hidden power behind our eyes is an ability to care for the present so much that we don't ignore the past. We don't forget the efficiency of the past. We don't forget the past, and we, in some sense, experience an ultimate future. That means we free mankind to its potential greatness, defining it. has its own rhythm. The mind is like something you cannot force. This is one of the most important things I've realized about meditation, mysticism of any sort, that the quality your mind has echoes in your inner realms. So the quality your attitude has, in some sense, emanates in the inner realms. So it's kind of like we're this space that is noticing the biological body creating sound, and the awareness to how sound is being created is trying to wonder about the full nature of the moment. The full nature of the moment obviously surpasses language. Language is it's like we created a smaller world to explain a world we couldn't understand, you know? Anybody who can't accept that they don't know cannot know the world, or they are possessed in a sort of ideological position. An advanced humanity will be conscious of how the mind perceives value in phenomena. And the species will be 100% capable of discriminating between their inner realms and outer realms. So if there was, hypothetically again, like an invisible extraterrestrial invasion of mind, it would be in some sense as if every human being would be capable of discriminating between their inner realms, their outer realms, and their cyber realms, their cyber life. This is in a sort of materialistic future I'm envisioning. In a non-materialistic future, if somebody says, Mr.Within, what is the future of the soul? I would say the soul is the future. That's why anything is happening at all. The soul, it's poetically like the body has no clue what's going on. The mind knows that something's going on, and the soul is what's happening. What it is that the capability of intelligence to fathom reality in the inner realms gives it an authorization to happen in the outer realms. That means the personality, if the whole human species was seen as like one human being, right? Like we managed to look at the whole cosmos and be like, yo, what if that was a person? But let's look at the idea of human civilization being like a person, okay? And having an inner realm and an outer realm. You know, could the fools of lesser dimensions be the eyes of greater ones? You know, what is moving human beings? You know, there's external factors, epistemological factors, and then there is how our energy trusts the world to happen. To be a human being is to, in some sense, be an entity. To be an entity is, in some sense, a relationship with the context of the moment. That means if a person doesn't trust that they're in a world, how can they be anything in it? An advanced species. You know, it's as if imagine the day where not only individuals deserve advancement, but everything deserves advancement. You know, that means, right, like, think of it this way, if somebody was to cook a meal, like right now I think about it, I'm like, okay, if I was to cook a meal, right, there is 100% people in the world that can cook that same meal better than me. You know, like there's like, you know, so similarly, I think about right now, I am looking at the world in a certain way.
To be a philosopher is to humbly carry a lantern, in a dark forest. The light of the moment can reanimate, can reset the moment. The brain probably subconsciously is experiencing everything, like every time we blink, like we could say that's a sort of mini psychological reset. That means imagine in this whole time, all the times I've blinked, the brain had to be like, okay, absence of reality, what now? So that nanosecond absence of reality kind of directs consciousness to how reality is fulfilling itself. To me, the idea of soul can be seen like a seed planted, before a plant that's sprouted could recognize. We are the potential of a world before us, and we have, like, it's so bizarre that it's like every human being that is born, it's like they are the decision maker of their genetical continuity, like their lineage, Pretty much the vision is like this, an advanced humanity, an advanced civilization, and an advanced world, and an advanced truth. And the most advanced truth is in the inconceivable. That means I have thought about where all ideological systems in secular society are going, and it's like it's going towards the language threshold, guys. We're reaching that point as creatures where we're realizing we reacted to the emptiness and meaninglessness of the moment by creating language that replaced the direct experience of the moment. Right now, we can say children are being raised to be ideological entities rather than biological entities. It's just the nature of the mind, like a lotus opening up, the mind of the human being is opening up. It's like it's that phase where what is left we experience, a simulation of like we experience the biological life. We experience the, let's say, ideological life. We experienced, in some sense, the life in time and all the ways that we have, let's say, our eyes have flown in the space-time continuum. Just like a bird flying, between clouds. Some part of the intelligence of the moment already trusts itself to exist. It's as if the person's personality and ego can doubt itself, but the heartbeat doesn't doubt itself. That means the biology is functioning under a pattern of intelligence that it doesn't matter really what sort of idea the person has to some degree, right? But what sort of idea they have suggests how the inner witness considers how much energy and power is needed in the moment. So it's as if the mind has to decide, am I going to realize truth by not doing anything? Or am I going to realize truth by seeing what is the most advanced thing that can be done? This is a choice. It's a choice everybody has to make. It's as if all I'm saying is that our eyes are like how a biological system managed to interpret and capture light. Like, I never thought about it this way, but it's like my eyes have been catching light beams, like, like players in baseball catching the baseball, It's like the person, instead of saying looking, it's like I caught some sight today, imagine, like a fisherman. I saw reality today, So all I can say is we must have an incredible multidimensional tolerance to
That means whatever we are as beings, we don't fear what the truth could be. We try to comprehend why is self-awareness active? Why is there an awareness to a sense of self at all? And these are questions that, it's the most incredible thing about the unknown. This is the most important thing about mysticism, actually. If a person goes towards spirituality with desire, that's not going to be spirituality. Spirituality is something where it's kind of like how they say if you chase the butterfly, you're a step behind. But if you sit down among the flowers and you cultivate that just inner simple pleasantness, I guess, I don't know. Right, so it's like once you sit still among the flowers, the butterfly lands on your forehead. That means you don't find the soul, your soul finds you, when you can be the simplest and the most, like if the person can just simply be and realize, okay, this is what the unknown is. The unknown is like an instantaneous moment where consciousness cannot have a value, or whatever value it has, it's not absolute, right? It's like a soul wondering if it's a soul. The soul's like, wait a minute, do I have a body right now? And then the soul's like, wait a minute, do I have a mind right now? And then the soul's like, oh my god, do I have a soul right now? Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like the attention playfully, instantaneously goes to the most serious cultivated nature of mind. It's something that was alive in, you can say, ancient mystical culture. In mystical cultures, was that a person in their lifetime needed to find their divine memory, their divine remembrance. That means it wasn't about just the person being fascinated through the idea of spiritualism and past lives, like it was more like the person has to find their universal memory, a memory where it's not how many times they have been a human being, but in how many ways or in what ways is being. Everybody should start cultivating advanced I don't know how to say it, but it's like to cultivate the spirit of advancement as how your free will moves in the moment. From let's say a bewildered savage animal, we have come to the advanced platform of being capable of noticing the outer realms and the inner realms. The inner realms is a new reorganization of the idea of imagination. There's a difference between saying we can't see something, and then trying to see something. These are two different things. This world is multidimensional, and I have my own unique perception on it. For me, the world is kept in 4 dimensions, and I have right now found contentment with these 4 dimensions, and I'm kind of like wondering why attention is still present, because energy needs direction, right? Needs a direction to go, and that direction is based on how we value the world. It's hilarious how we value the world suggests how we value ourselves. A rare opportunity, humanity is a rare evolutionary opportunity. It's an unknown psychological opportunity. Or let me say it's an honorable psychological opportunity. And the idea is, rather than being a creature defined by one dimension of our perception, we become a creature that is the potential of all the ways that perception has happened. It's as if the person no longer needs to remember anything because they have become all their memories. You know, it's like an instantaneous being. You know, this is something that was very unexpected for me as an experience, you know, where I was like, oh my god, this whole time my mind has been a behavioral reaction to itself, right? What that means is like the privacy of the inner realms. If you truly comprehend the nature of the inner realms, it's like imagine in your mind, like imagine some architect in their mind, you know, saw the Eiffel Tower and then built it, right? And it's in some sense there was a trust in the inner realm and there was a trust in the outer realm, and it was something advanced happened, you know? When human beings trust their body and mind, the mind is poetically the world, right? So if somebody wants to trust their body, it's like just their physical existence. But if they were to trust their mind, it would be to trust the greatest thing the mind has come up with, you know? Something I will till the end of time re-emphasize, you know? As long as these, you know, I don't know how far these talks are going to go, you know? Who knows, you know? It's more like, you know, presenting an opportunity and wondering if nature responds. In 100 years, what I'm saying about the advanced civilization, everybody will realize its value. It's just going to become a better context to the story of the world. You know, if somebody says, Mr.Within, the species was cruel, we had a savage history, we don't deserve an advanced civilization, I would be like, that's the reason you deserve one. Our failures are why we deserve success, poetically. You know, because in some sense, it's all about the recognition. It's where your attention is stationed. You know? It's like I thought I was a podcaster, then I realized I'm not my thoughts. You know? So where are you left at? Let's say, what sort of state of mind is in a position where it's like, okay, biological, information of the biological perspective is honestly being received. The information of one's inner realms, what they see, how their mind happens, is being honestly received, and then the person is just waiting to see what mind moves the moment. You know, there will come a time where human beings won't have time for they won't have, there will come a time where the advanced civilization is going to get rid of all psychological suffering. Not by changing the human being, but in some sense it's like just to see with the most advanced version of every moment. I mean, I think this advancement is a great strategy if you find yourself in a world in the middle of nowhere. You know, pretty much the person's like, okay, I stay as the stillness of the, let's say, you know, spacious awareness observer, or I in some sense identify as the observed. For a multidimensional being to be any type of being is a choice. You know, it's like we think our bodies are the purpose of our minds. You know, we think that, right? We think it's just the biological inspiration, but the purpose of like the body, it's like, how would I say it? It's like one dimension realizing it belonged to another. The advanced civilization, it would be like the ultimate workstation, all human beings being born in some sense contributing. And there's going to be next level history, you know. There will was an idea I suggested in these talks, where I was thinking, like, how can we get violent behavior to be reduced? Like unnecessary violence on the planet, right? Unnecessary disturbance, destructive disturbance in moments, right? Like, imagine, how do we solve the problem of all the bad neighborhoods in society? And I realized the human intelligence is seeking something that empowers it. Why people want to survive is because it's a powerful archetype. Success is, like, poetically the most powerful archetype. Enlightenment is like the success of the mind, next level archetype, But it's kind of like, it's like we're this evolving journey. And this evolving journey is like, what do I do with all the ways that self can be? And what do I do with all the ways the world can be? Right? And you discover your inner vision. You find poetically the original earth within the original state. When I say original state, I mean the simplest moment before your mind chose an attitude towards complexity. Right? There is a simplicity. It's kind of like before we learned language, it's like the playfulness of the child is a non-ideological one. The child is a conscious experiencer of the moment, but the child is not an ideologically conscious experiencer of the moment. The young child, right? When we've all been children. We've all like, there was a moment before any of us learned to communicate or speak or walk in the story of the earth. So everybody has access to a presence of how they are consciously experiencing the moment, regardless of what content is added. These are worlds we walk in. We're like the eyes of a universe walking, on the surface of a planet. We are a way the cosmos remembers itself. And somebody's like, did the divine will forget its original station? You see, if the idea of heaven is like the most advanced state, let's say someone religious is here, if you think heaven is the most advanced state, then what state, in some sense? It's as if the mystery of your eyes, it doesn't matter if you're in a paradise or wherever you are in the space-time continuum. It's like the mystery of, it's as if the person's like, if I go to heaven, who went to heaven? Who is this consciousness that is the free will sequentially deciding and crafting the moments of its life, We animate it as if there's like, we're ultimately this energy, and then this energy has an expressive ability. Its expressive ability is multidimensional, and we're like, what can a species do with these limited tools, right? It's as if a person thought they were in a simulation. There's some people being like, how can I use the simulation to realize truth, right? It's as if, imagine everybody who saw something inefficient happen in civilization just sat and stared at a problem, right? And wondered about the efficient, because usually it shows it. And let me tell you why we need less violence on the earth, because our minds are choosing to express out. It's like we're being a caterpillar. That is all, like, imagine the caterpillar and the butterfly were the same being in two different parallel realities happening at the same time. So the caterpillar's mind was the butterfly, and the butterfly's body was the caterpillar. A caterpillar with a butterfly mind. I'm gonna give it talk on that in the future. Represent caterpillars and butterflies, For me, honestly, I think the caterpillar is actually the most advanced creature on this planet, like irrelevant of brain ability to use its intelligence. It takes us 4.5 billion years. It's like the more bigger the creature is, the longer its changes, and the slower its changes. The smaller the creature, the change has been immediate. Imagine a caterpillar being like, yo, I can be a butterfly and all I gotta do is go into this cocoon and let go of how I am a caterpillar. And it's just like all the caterpillar cells, one by one, they are destroyed until it comes to the last caterpillar cell, and then the last caterpillar cell biologically becomes the first butterfly cell. It's like the caterpillar is the most mysterious creature on this planet. A creature that doesn't die. Before dying, the caterpillar destroys itself. Like enlightenment is literally what a caterpillar is doing in the cocoon. So the caterpillar is such an intelligent creature that before it dies, it transforms itself and lives another life than theirs. Do you see? Like the caterpillar as a creature, like is living two lives before it enters the void. But we're just living one life, but our inner realms can readjust us. It's kind of like when we realize our bodies and our consciousness, it's like that consciousness is the space of our life. This is shamanically, like all shamans probably know this, that it's like some people die and some people get ready to, I shouldn't say it like this, I should say some people transition physically and some people become never physical beings who then transition doesn't mean it. Not that it doesn't mean anything, but it's like there was a mystery that the truth of the moment is how the moment is happening. It's as if the person's like, what's the greatest truth? What is the greatest truth? Excuse me. What is the greatest truth I have access to? And the greatest truth is the greatest state of our mind. And you know what's fascinating? If we can't trust our sight, we can't activate it. From a civilization that is convinced it's okay to be inefficient, it's like mankind will rise towards the most advanced civilizations. People are going to start preparing as if they are living in the future's future. Because in some sense, what Mr.Within's gift is, Mr.Within is the archetype of the inner being. It's a pointer to that idea that as life is physically happening in front of our eyes, it's also happening behind our eyes. Like nobody can deny that. Yeah. And when I say behind our eyes, I mean when I close my eyes, without light hitting my eyes, I can see a picture, as if the mind is a space where you don't need light to see this. The memory can instantaneously have content. Inner shape. And so the idea is to see the advanced activation of a species. Pretty much before we go extinct, the species has to attempt its greatest performance in the void and then enter. Okay, so we have to, at least as a species, try to see what the most advanced civilization would look like if we failed, and failure was its own end. right now the species is wondering about if the individual is succeeding or failing. That's what all politicians talk about. They only talk about what needs to happen in the nation, not what needs to happen in the world. You know. We have to realize that it gets boring when the reality has a potential and that potential isn't activated. You know. Fear is another way of saying we're noticing the moment's texture, the way the moment is changing. Really, we are an unknown viewer of the changing moment rather than a photographic brain simulation. You know. Now, somebody will say, Mr. Within, you talk about the future, you say, rather than you go finding your soul, let the soul find you. So how would the soul of the future find us now? I'm thinking if such a question existed, what would the answer be? And the idea is that if we think about it, that right now I am in the present and I can remember yesterday's memory. So I could remember yesterday as I'm here right now. So I'm present now, but I'm remembering in my mind simultaneously the image of how I was living first person point of view yesterday is in my mind. So just like the past became the present and the present can remember the past, the way the present has a relationship with the poetic hidden potential of this idea of the future. A species that doesn't fear its advanced destiny. It's like to be a human being is to be a universal being. To be a mind is to be aware of a universe. The awareness of the universe can choose to be defined by the universe, or it can choose that it's accepting the structure of value to the moment. Sometimes I poetically treat my mind, whenever I don't know what to do, I just treat my mind like a blank canvas. And then I look at the blank canvas and I'm like, okay, what needs to be drawn? Our minds are because we have different DNAs, everybody's brain is like a different, I shouldn't say brain, everybody's DNA is like a unique instrument. Imagine people were instruments, and everybody what their DNAs were different, were like different instruments, okay? Our species in 2022 is on a level of consideration of the mind. What the mind is we are at the phase where the ideological entity restores its relationship with the nature of its world. It's like, what would a ultimately free being choose? What sort of desire can a being that has experienced all desires have? Imagine a being that was free, right? Free from any concept, any context. It's as if, what desire would you have for the world? And it's as if, sometimes being too spiritual is like leaving your body alone, The body is it's an intelligence, and these instruments, if they are played, it's imagine every person's mind, whatever they can do, whatever way they know their intelligence to be capable of expressing and advancing let's say the sector of communication for the species, right? We're just creatures that have like 5,000 years ago writing was discovered, you know. And right now the species is in some sense being overloaded on information. You know, it's hilarious. Just like, you know, fast food and just, how would I say it? Like the gastronomy of it's like if people were like, how was it like living in civilization 1.0? It's like there was too much sugar in civilization, you know? You know, I'm even noticing a person can get addicted to an emotion. You know, it's like reality is a very fascinating space. It's like, what can the intellect be? How the heartbeat is creating an opportunity for attention to notice itself. You know, we are the world's ability to look at itself again. You know, it's like a person who feels like the world. Imagine someone who's really experienced oneness. It's as if, you know, you ask them, hey man, do you fear what's going to happen to the human species? And they're like, buddy, I'm being everything right now. Everything can't fear itself. Only dualistic entities can fear. Fear is a dualistic relationship. We fear because we notice the unknown. And the unknown, of course, everybody has to be super cautious. Just like a bird sits on a branch, like if a person looks at a bird on a branch, you'll notice the bird's head is instantaneously scanning every moment. Like birds have ridiculous neck movement, you know. I don't think I'm the first person to notice this, but like what can I say? Attention can move in multiple ways. I'm just saying the species has to revalue reality in accordance to its advanced future potential rather than its past mistake, rather than the actuality of its past mistake. What is the value of tomorrow but how far our eyes have opened to the world? Freedom from how our mind creates others is a realization that our soul has an expression, as an idea. We have an inner realm life. Our inner life is pretty much the level of meaning. When I ask myself, what does it mean to be a mind in a world? What does it mean, or how does it even feel like to be consciousness to a world? And there is no language, you know, it's like there are silent, you know, hidden dimensions. There's ways that attention is present that is free from the human idea. And there's ways where it's not free, right? Like the person chooses how, like what concept pulls their mind, you know. You know, it's kind of like physically, civilization is avoiding ability. Advancement is, in some sense, mastery. That means we can build an advanced civilization the moment we treat that if there's like 8 billion masters in this realm. When I say master, I mean able being, I don't mean cultural value. In the context of mastery.
So what does mastery mean? It means understanding of the space and the ability for something to move in space and ultimately the unknown. Because what honesty means from a metaphysical context, mystical context, is like the person seeing the world but not knowing who is seeing it. So the realization of the mind is to discover the unknown being, how we are being, how our intelligence in the moment is present in unknown ways. That means it's like the human body is just the tip of the iceberg of what is the intelligence that's moving this body. The concept of the soul is just the concept of where does intelligence arrive from, where does it come from. The only reason the idea of the soul exists is because people wondered if there was something more than the mind and the body. And really, the idea of the soul in certain cultures, for example, in Iran, in Farsi, they call it ruh. Ruh, and in Vedic culture, they called it prana. And what is ruh? It's the breath. So people back in the day pretty much saw a human being stop breathing, and it was as if something was gone. The intelligence that was moving the moment from within enters the void, or is no longer there. As much as I have desires and I fathom visions for civilization, all of this, I know that there will come a moment where I will be left with my own work, which is another way of saying, how did attention choose to pilot before it became completely unknown? Right now, our body is being a source of our individualistic concept of knowledge. So the unknown is something that we're all explorers in an unknown world, rather than characters and storylines that can always change. The story of the world is a co-creation between what is man-made and what is world-shown, displayed. Imagine finding a peacefulness before the concept of peacefulness. It's like realizing energy doesn't have an ideological purpose, so the attention stops freaking out. The psyche relaxes because it realizes that if before it was reacting to the unknown, now it's realized, okay, the whole thing is unknown. That means we are, the more intelligent this evolutionary animal has become, the more worlds it is contextually wondering about. What imagination is what's the newest world you can find. Because novelty is it's pretty much like content based on the past, content based on the present, content based on the future. If we want to envision the future from the present, we have to envision what will happen. Imagine imagine an inventor not just envisioning their invention, but envisioning the usage of their invention in civilization. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like anytime we think about ourselves, eventually, if we think about ourselves enough, we'll eventually realize that the next ways, it's like the next chapter of the study of self is in some sense worldhood. It's pretty much the bodhisattvic archetype. That means complete trust in individual existence, but now you're experiencing a multidimensional experience. So it's like a multidimensional mind's freedom. And the singular body is like, okay, now I know. It's like our eyes remember that the origin of the instantaneous origin and presence of intelligence
is it's not something that can be measured. It's another way of saying an instantaneous truth reveals man's ideological structures overlaid on reality are not accurate, right? That means there is a way, like let's say if you ask someone what is history and they tell you a story, it's another way of saying they have replaced an unknown fragment of time with an image, you know. A species that becomes conscious of its future instantaneously becomes conscious that it can advance. That's the power of the future. You know, let's say if magic was a sort of power, technology was a sort of power, the idea of the future is like this next level power. It's something that we all forgot because the past was keeping us busy, you know, and so the species awakens to the potential of what it can be, and pretty much 8 billion worlds are hiding behind our eyes. You know, I'll say it differently. There's 8 billion versions of the world whenever there's a conscious biological entity logged into the waking state. You know, the mysteries of reality are right here in front of our eyes. The world was never a story. And what true freedom means is to realize the unknown cannot be expected. You know, knowledge has a future, but the unknown was here from the beginning. That's the nature of the unknown. It's like before in a horizontal dimension, an entity attained immortality. It was like it vertically shifted into a collective being. You know, because we think space is not intelligent, matter is, but space is holding matter. Do you see what I'm saying? It's as if the edge of the world is the intelligence of now. Wonder about a freedom that is the most advanced, and it comes to be an instantaneous freedom. That means it's like a post-enlightened species. You know, it's our eyes are here now. You know, how will the moment go forth? That's the fascination of living in an unknown world. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Much blessings and namaste.